Now, and today we delve into the heart of our national identity with findings from the newly released 2024-25 State of the Nation Brand Report by Brand South Africa. Now, the study paints a fascinating picture of how South Africans perceive themselves, and the report examines three crucial pillars that shape our nation's brand, which being social cohesion, active citizenship, and national pride. Brand South Africa CEO Neville Matjie joins me now to chat a bit more on the findings of this survey. Very good morning to you, Mr. Matjie. But before we get into the findings of the survey, of course, this was launched last month in collaboration with Mail and Guardian. And at the time, you were looking at a study that's underpinned by the domestic perception study. In fact, you described it as not just a data study, but a mirror to show us a reflection of ourselves. So what is it then that the study tells us about South Africans and how we perceive ourselves?
Good morning, and good morning to the viewers. Thank you for hosting me this morning. First of all, I just want to indicate that for Brand South Africa, this is an important study. What informs us in terms of how we market and position South Africa globally is we take it from the views of South Africans. So we run two critical studies. This is the first study that we run, which is basically the views and expressions of South Africans in terms of how they relate to being South African and how we are supposed to position the country through their eyes. And then the second study that we do is a global reputation study. And that one will be launched around about end of May this year. They're just concluding that process. So we run these surveys annually for us to have a better picture of where South Africa currently stands. And we take the study through our shareholder department, which is through GCIS. And then it also assists us in the repositioning of ourselves from a strategy perspective on Brand South Africa and how we're able to look at key programs. And one of those programs is the Play Your Part campaign that we run as Brand South Africa, which encourages South Africans to really take initiatives as South Africans, because our biggest ambassadors are our own people. And our own people can only talk through the stories of how they view themselves. So two critical areas that came out of the study: South Africans' perceptions. One question that was asked is, how do you define yourself? Do you define yourself as a South African? Do you define yourself as an African? And the overwhelming majority indicated that they really define themselves as South Africans first, and then second as African, purely because we're talking to people at home. So they actually see themselves first, and they identify from a patriotic sense as South Africans.
And 53% of South Africans then considering national identity to be the most important, the most defining aspect of their lives, while there's another 65.7% that, of course, were measured in social cohesion. Talk me through a bit on that, because it's something that's becoming a bit topical in the country now with geopolitics and the tensions with the US and also racial tensions within the country. But your survey says that the social cohesion index climbed up actually to 65.7% in light of the government of national unity. Take me through some of the findings there.
Yeah, so the study actually, that was a new indicator that we had included in light of course, the GNU and how the perceptions of South Africans in respect of it. And it was quite interesting to note that a lot of South Africans, there's a new sense of optimism in terms of our government. And from a social cohesion perspective, it really indicates that there's a sense that there's greater unity within the country. Hence, you see those results coming through, being described that way. However, it's a sense of optimism. It's not through lived experience. So we'll be able to sense that, for next year when we do a follow-up study to say, through a lived experience of the GNU, how do you now feel? But in essence, this is how the South Africans have responded to it.
Yeah, and I like making this a bit more practical, because you're talking about how they've responded in light of the GNU. Another interesting observation is active citizenship. A lot more people in the country not wanting to be passive and taking the backseat and watching things unfold. A lot more coming to the fore and wanting to be part of the change that they want to see. Take me through the findings in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that talks to our campaign on the Play Your Part side, because it really shows that South Africans are not sitting back, as you've rightfully said. They're wanting to take take matters into their own hands in a positive way to portray South Africa in a more positive light. You would have seen it, and I've personally seen it quite often, especially with the current strain that we're currently having, how South Africans have come out in defense of South Africa, in defense of the real truth around South Africa, but most importantly, in defense of how South Africa is actually such an economic powerhouse and an important factor in as far as global trade is concerned. We've also seen an upswing in terms of trust in terms of the business sector, and the collaboration between the private sector and government also emerged quite strong in that regard, because it shows that our government is not sitting back and not communicating with the private sector, nor is the private sector running on in its own direction. And of course, the G20 is, again, another optimism that is created because you're seeing a closer cohesion between the civil society, government, private sector, which really encourages that sense of social cohesion.
Yeah, and the study finding over 60%, in fact, for government-led social upliftment initiatives like the Expanded Public Works Program and NSFAS. But when you look at studies like this, of course, people want to understand what the data is backed by. So who did you survey in the study? And perhaps in terms of timelines, what were you looking at in terms of what you had for your study in particular?
Yeah. It's a very fair question that you're asking. I think the important thing for the viewers to understand is the study was critiqued by the academic sector. In fact, when we did the soft launch of the sector, we had academics from UJ and other academic institutions who've actually gone through the study to verify that it's not garbage in, garbage out. It's basically what the community wants to talk about and critical areas. We also not averse to the fact that the country still has challenges. And those challenges remain, and it's incumbent upon the respective departments to deal with those challenges. And this is what we communicate back to the departments in terms of how the citizens feel from a service delivery perspective. But at the same time, we can't sit back and not market South Africa as a destination for new investors, because we have to still create jobs. We have to boost the economy of the country. And that is part of the messaging that has resonated from the study, from South Africans saying, please continue in that mission to ensure that South Africa remains a global player.
And if you're looking at some of the challenges and room for improvement, then as we look to wrap up, what are some of the key concerns that would have come out of the study where South Africans might have indicated a bit more pessimism around particular issues?
Yes. So critically, obviously, from the study, what has come out quite strongly from a service delivery perspective, is my water going to be on today? Is my electricity going to be on? But we've seen, of course, a big improvement in as far as the electricity sector is concerned, and a big congratulations, of course, to Eskom and my colleagues there. But it's really those sense of service delivery issues. The second part is really from a crime perspective. That's another big issue that South Africans are still drawing attention to from their perspective, that if there's a huge improvement in terms of those areas, you will see an upswing in terms of the patriotism within the country, and a sense of belonging will actually improve even more.
Well, it does sound like generally then the sentiment is still largely positive despite people having issues with the service delivery and crime. And in fact, we are asking our viewers in our poll question this morning in terms of how happy they are. And it's a question I'd like to pose to you. Having seen some of the results, of course, how proud are they as South Africans, as a brand South Africa? You would have had sight of this. We gave these options: very proud, not so proud, depends on the day, I don't care anymore. And 61% of our viewers at the moment are sitting on very proud, while there's 25% are not so proud. Would you say this is in line more or less with what you would have seen then from your results? Around 60% of South Africans still very proudly South African, despite the challenges that we face as a country.
Absolutely. I think that's a clear example of how South Africans are feeling. And this is the sense that we've been able to pick up from our study. But over and above that is the interaction of course, with, the the visitors that come to South Africa. I'm yet to meet one who visits South Africa and decides that they don't want to come back. South Africa is a truly remarkable country. I personally love my country, and that's a sense that is shown from that study. But over and above that, you are not oblivious to the things that are around you, and most importantly, what is it that us as South Africans are going to do to assist in changing the narrative? And that is really the essence of the study.
Well, where to now? Of course, you did say this was one of 2 studies that you plan to release. When can we expect the reputation study, and what does that then entail?
Yeah, the reputation study will be launched in May this year. So the reputation study measures South Africa's reputation globally, and I think it's apt that we're doing it now in light of what is currently happening globally. And it measures South Africa against other nations, both emerging markets as well as the developed nations, and but over and above it tries to position. It measures how South Africa's reputation is within the global markets from an investor confidence perspective, from a visitor perspective, and also from general people who want to know more about the country. So those 3 critical areas give an indication of how South Africa is faring globally. But at the base of that is the issue around the economy and its stability, as well as the support by government in terms of investors coming into the nation.
Well, it should be quite an interesting one if you're looking at the developments around our economy at the moment and how the Government of National Unity is looking to make things work for our vote with the budget as well. But thank you so much. That's where we'll leave it with you as we await that reputation report a bit later on this year. And that was, of course, from the Brand South Africa CEO Neville Matjie.